Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for everyone. In this occasion, we are going presenting history of American literature in realism and naturalism era with my partner in group.
My name is Rihanaya Jaya Putri and my student number is 35.
I'm Kurniana Nirmala and my student number is 39.
And me, myself, Gahtan Mubarak Al-Jaidi, with student number is 14. Okay, for the first, we are gonna discuss the history of American literature, which will explained by Rihanaya. Naya, time is yours.
Okay. The history of American literature. What is the history of American literature in this early stage? During the 1600, American literature consists mostly of practical nonfiction written by British settlers who populated the colonies that would become the United States. This history is published in 1608 and 1624 are among the earliest work of American literature. The history of American literature stretches across more than 400 years. It can be divided into 5 major periods, each of which has unique characteristics, notable authors, and representative works. Realism and Naturalism, 1870 to 1910. American Realism was a style in art, music, and literature that depicted contemporary social realities and the life and everyday activities of ordinary people. The movement began in literature in the mid-19th century and became an important tendency in visual art in the early 20th century. Whether a cultural portrayal or a scenic view of downtown New York City, American realist work attempted to define what was real.
Okay, thank you, Naya. For the next will be explained by Nirmala. Lala, time is yours.
Thank you. In the US, at the beginning of the 20th century, a new generation of painters, writers, and journalists were coming of age. Many of the painters felt the influence of older US artists such as Thomas Eakins, Mary Cassatt, John Singer Sargent, James McNeill Whistler, Winslow Hammer, Charles Assam, G. Alden Ware, Thomas Pollock Ansatz, and William Merritt Chase. However, they were interested in creating new and more urban works that reflect city life and a population that was more urban than rural in the US as it entered the new century. Between 1870 and 1910, there were two main movements that took place in American literature. There is realism and naturalism. Realism was a literary movement that focused on ordinary everyday life situation. Naturalism, like realism, was a literary movement that drew its inspiration from French authors of the 19th century who sought to document through fiction the reality that they saw around them, particularly among the middle and working classes living in cities. The human cost of the Civil War in the United States was immense. More than 2.3 million soldiers fought in the war, and perhaps as many as 851 people died in 1861 until 65. Walt Whitman claimed that a great literature will arise out of the era of those 4 years. And what emerged in the following decades was a literature that presented in detailed and unembellished vision of the world as it truly was. This was the essence of realism.
Okay, thank you, Nirmala. For
You're welcome.
the next will be explained by myself. Yeah, naturalism was an intensive from of realism. After the grim reality of devastating war, they became writers. Primary mode expression, naturalism, like realism, was a literary movement that drew inspiration from the French author of the 19th century, who sought to document through the fiction the reality that they saw around them, particularly among the middle and the working classes living in the city. What are the characteristics of realism in American literature? Is it objective, free will, sometimes optimistic, everyday settings, ordinary events, and common man character? There is frequent use of colloquial speech. Diction is natural, supernatural, non-high intended or poetic. Tone may be comic, satiric, or matter of fact. Thank you. That's all the explanation of the history of American literature, especially in realism and naturalism era by our group. Thank you. And wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.